Okay, so you guys really went all in this time.
Yeah, it looks like someone's serious about hitting the gym.
Seriously, a whole mountain of stuff on building muscle, all about nutrition and supplements. So for this deep dive, we're going to zero in on,
Will Brink's muscle building nutrition.
right, exactly. We're going to pull out the really important stuff, the actionable stuff that you can actually use to pack on some lean mass.
Yeah, and right off the bat, I think it's worth repeating what Brink himself says.
Yeah.
We're not into any of that get huge, quick
Oh,
garbage.
yeah. None of the quick fixes.
This is about getting a solid foundation based on science, based on what you sent us.
Exactly. We're going to help you guys cut through all the noise, all the conflicting info out there about building muscle, especially the nutrition part.
On nutrition and the supplements.
Right, because as we all know, the gym is step one. You got to be hitting the weights, but
Brink is very clear about that.
right.
You know, if you're not exercising, those extra calories are just going to end up as fat.
Yeah. But for this deep dive, we're going to stay laser focused on the nutrition and the supplements.
Sounds good.
So, where do we begin?
Well, I guess the first thing is energy. Where does all that energy from our food actually go?
That's all about energy balance.
Energy balance.
It's a really simple idea. The energy you eat, it's got to go somewhere.
Okay.
And Brink lays it out as an equation. Energy intake equals energy expenditure plus energy storage. Doesn't matter if you want to gain weight, lose weight, or stay the same, that equation is always at work.
Makes sense. So let's dig into that energy expenditure side a little bit. According to the text, what are the main ways that our bodies burn calories?
Okay, so Brink gives us three main components.
'Cause
The first one is your resting metabolic rate.
resting metabolic rate or RMR?
RMR, exactly. And that's just the energy your body needs to keep you alive, breathing, your heart beating, keeping your temperature stable.
Okay.
The thing about RMR is that it's the biggest chunk of the pie, often as much as 75% of your total daily energy expenditure.
Wow, so almost 3/4 just for existing.
Pretty much.
Okay, so what are the other ways we burn energy? All right, so number 2 is the thermic effect of a meal, or TEM.
TEM.
This is the energy your body uses to break down, absorb, and process all that food you eat.
Got it.
And then finally, there's the energy expenditure of physical activity, or EPA.
EPA.
Basically, all the calories you burn through exercise and any other kind of physical movement.
And obviously that's the one we have the most control over.
Exactly.
Okay, so these three RMR, EPA, all of those together make up our total daily energy expenditure, our TDEE.
Right.
So how do we figure out what that number is for each of us? Because if we want to build muscle, we need to be eating more calories than we're burning, right?
Exactly. More calories in than out. That's the
Right.
key. Brink gives us a few different ways to estimate your TDEE. He talks about the Harris-Benedict formula, and then there's a newer one called the Vinkin formula. Those take into account things like your gender, your weight, your height and age.
All that good stuff.
But he also gives us a way simpler method based on your weight.
Oh, well, simpler is always better. So what's that look like?
Okay, so for weight loss, he suggests around 20 to 25 kilocalories per kilogram of body weight per day.
Okay.
To maintain your weight, it's about 25 to 30 kilocalories per kilogram.
All right.
And then for gaining weight, it goes from 30 to 35 kilocalories per kg. For slower gains, up to maybe 35 plus for faster gains. But here's the thing for you, since you're focused on muscle growth.
Yeah.
For active people who are trying to gain weight, Brink recommends aiming for around 45 kilogram of body weight.
45 nacals per kilo. So if you weigh, say, 200 pounds, it's like 91 kilograms. That means you'd be eating over 4,000 calories a day.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot, but remember, that's a starting point, particularly if you're hitting the gym regularly and really trying to build muscle. Brink also makes a good point. You know, if you're someone who gains fat easily, you might want to start a bit lower and see how your body reacts.
That's a good point.
But the principle's the same. To gain weight, you got to eat more than you burn consistently. And with the right training, hopefully all that extra energy will go towards building muscle.
Okay, so energy balance is the foundation. Now let's talk about the building blocks, the actual food. The macronutrients, protein, fat, and carbohydrates. Protein is usually the first thing people think of when it comes to muscle. What are the key takeaways from Brink on protein?
All right, so first, Brink clears up what protein actually is. It's made up of amino acids, about 20 different kinds.
Amino acids.
Right, and 8 of those are essential, meaning your body can't make them, you got to eat them.
Got it.
Then there are some others that are conditionally essential. Basically, your body might need more of them in certain situations.
Interesting.
And Brink emphasizes that these amino acids are like the bricks that make up all the different protein molecules.
Okay, so protein's not just about building bigger biceps then.
Oh, definitely not. Brink points out a bunch of other important roles it plays.
Okay, like what?
Well, for one thing, amino acids can be used for energy through a process called gluconeogenesis. That's when your body makes glucose from non-carb sources like protein.
Okay.
They're also super important for protein synthesis, not just in your muscles, but in all sorts of tissues throughout your body.
Right.
And unlike what some people think, your body's not very good at turning protein into fat.
So that's a myth busted right there.
Exactly. And on top of that, protein has a high thermic effect.
Thermic effect.
That means your body actually burns a good chunk of energy
Yep.
just digesting, metabolizing, and storing protein, maybe as much as 20% of your daily energy expenditure.
20% just from processing protein.
That's pretty wild. So how much protein do we actually need to be eating to build muscle? I'm guessing the standard recommended daily allowance isn't going to cut it for people who are active.
You're right on the money there. Brink points out that for years, people thought the RDA was enough even for athletes, which he calls total bunk.
Yeah, I can imagine. He talks about the research of Dr. Peter Lemon and others, who have shown that people doing strength training need way more protein to repair and build muscle and also to prevent muscle loss.
Makes sense.
Lemon recommends something like 1.5 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body mass each day for anyone doing strength exercises.
So for our 200-pound person, 91 kilograms, that's about 136 to 164 grams of protein every day.
Right around there.
Now, the document also mentions that old 1 gram per pound of body weight rule. Where does that fit in?
Yeah, Brink talks about that too. He says it's been a popular guideline forever. And actually, it lines up pretty well with the scientific recommendations, especially on the higher end of that 1.5 to 1.8 grams per kilogram range.
Got it.
So for someone weighing 200 pounds, that would be 200 grams of protein.
Okay, so somewhere in that 1 to 1.8 grams per kilogram range, or roughly 1 gram per pound, seems like a good target for active folks trying to build muscle. And what kinds of proteins should we be focusing on?
Brink gives us a helpful list, although it's not exhaustive. He divides protein sources into good and not so good.
All right, so what's on the good list?
Things like lean red meat, skinless chicken and turkey fish and other seafood, and low-fat cottage cheese.
Okay, pretty standard stuff.
Yeah, and then on the not-so-good side, you've got processed luncheon meats, high-fat ground beef, ham, most cheeses, bacon, sausage, and whole milk. Those have more saturated fat.
Got it. So leaner and less processed are generally the better choices for protein when you're trying to build muscle. Now let's switch gears to fat. For a long time, fat was seen as the enemy. What's Brink's take on fat, especially when it comes to building muscle?
Brink definitely pushes back against that whole fat is bad idea. He makes it clear that not all fats are created equal. Just like with carbs and protein, different types of fat have different effects on your body.
Okay.
He talks about monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, which include those omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And he really stresses the importance of essential fatty acids, or EFAs. Yeah, especially omega-3s. Those are the ones your body can't make on its own. You got to get them from food.
Right. Omega-3s always seem to be in the news for their health benefits. What does Brink say about their role in building muscle and overall health?
Well, according to Brink, the list of potential benefits for omega-3s is pretty long.
Okay, lay it on me.
He says they could be anti-lipogenic, meaning they can help stop fat from being stored. They're anti-catabolic, so they help prevent muscle breakdown. They have anti-inflammatory properties. They can increase beta oxidation.
Beta oxidation.
That's how your body burns fat for fuel.
Got it.
They can improve your insulin sensitivity. They might even increase thermogenesis, that's calorie burning. And they play a role in gene transcription and your overall energy balance.
Wow, that is an impressive list. So what kind of balance of fats should we be aiming for in our diet?
Brink recommends a balanced approach, what he sometimes calls the 1/3 rule. Ideally, about 1/3 of your total fat should come from unprocessed polyunsaturated fats, rich in omega-3s like flaxseed oil, hemp oil, certain algae oils, and fatty fish like salmon.
Okay, 1/3 omega-3s.
Another third should be monounsaturated fats from things like olive oil, avocados, and nuts.
Got it.
And the final third can come from saturated fats, which are naturally found in red meat, whole milk butter, those kinds of things.
Makes sense.
Oh, and he also points out that you actually need some saturated fat to produce hormones like testosterone.
Ah, interesting. What about the fats we should be avoiding or at least minimizing?
Good question. Brink lists those unhealthy fats as processed vegetable oils, which are often high in omega-6s and can be pro-inflammatory. Then there are trans fats. You find those in margarine and anything that says partially hydrogenated oils on the label.
Okay, no trans fats.
And then fried foods of all kinds because of the potential trans fat content and all that processing. And basically any rancid or damaged fats, those can be bad for your health.
You mentioned the link between dietary fats and hormones, especially testosterone. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so Brink points out that the production of hormones like testosterone, which is super important for muscle growth and repair, is partly influenced by how much and what kind of fat you eat.
Okay.
So having some healthy saturated fat in your diet can help keep your testosterone levels up. He even talks about a study that compared muscle gains in older men who ate meat versus those on a lacto-ovo vegetarian diet.
Interesting.
The meat eaters gained more muscle, which suggests that something in meat, maybe certain types of fat, might be helping.
That's a good point, especially for people who are really serious about maximizing muscle growth. All right, let's move on to the final macronutrient, carbohydrates. They're our body's primary source of quick energy. What do we need to know about carbs for building muscle?
Okay, so Brink starts by explaining the difference between simple and complex carbs and how our bodies store glucose as glycogen in the liver and muscles. And he makes this really key point. Unlike protein and fat, there are actually no essential carbohydrates.
No essential carbs.
Right, your body can actually make its own glucose from protein and other non-carb sources if it needs to.
Right, I remember reading that in the text. So we don't strictly need to eat carbs, but they're definitely our body's preferred fuel source.
Exactly.
Now, the document also talks about the glycemic index, or GI. Can you explain what that is and why it matters?
Sure. The glycemic index basically measures how quickly a carb-containing food raises your blood sugar after you eat it, compared to a standard like pure glucose or white bread.
Okay.
And it's important because your blood sugar levels directly affect the release of insulin, which is a hormone that not only regulates blood sugar, but also plays a big role in fat storage and protein synthesis.
And too much insulin can be a problem, right? The text mentioned something about insulin resistance.
Right, insulin resistance is when your body's cells stop responding properly to insulin. So your blood sugar stays high, and your body has to pump out even more insulin to compensate. Over time, this can lead to more fat storage, more fat being produced from carbs in the liver, and it can even mess with your body's ability to burn stored fat effectively.
Got it. So the glycemic index is important because it tells us how a food affects our insulin levels. But it's not the only thing to consider when choosing carbs right.
Exactly. Brink makes the point that a lot of people think all complex carbs are low GI and all simple carbs are high GI, but that's just not true.
Right.
And the GI only tells you about the blood sugar impact. It doesn't tell you about the overall nutrient density or the fiber content of a food, which are also super important.
Okay, so the glycemic index is useful, but it's not the whole story. What about the research on how high versus low GI foods affect things like exercise performance and body fat?
Some studies found that eating low GI carbs like lentils before a workout led to better fat burning during exercise, and people could go for longer before getting tired compared to eating high GI foods like potatoes or glucose. There was another study with obese teenage boys that showed they actually ate way more calories later in the day after eating high GI meals compared to low GI meals.
Makes sense. If your blood sugar spikes and then crashes, you're going to be hungry again sooner.
Exactly.
So does this mean high GI carbs are totally off limits if you're trying to build muscle and stay lean?
Not necessarily. Brink actually points out one time when high GI carbs can be really beneficial right after a tough workout. After intense exercise, your body wants to replenish its glycogen stores, and high GI carbs can help with that faster because they raise blood sugar and insulin quickly. Plus, after a workout, your cortisol levels tend to go up, and the insulin spike from high GI carbs can help counter that.
So a post-workout shake with some fast-digesting protein and some high GI carbs like white rice or a banana could actually be a good strategy.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered energy balance and the macronutrients. Now let's get into the world of supplements. The second big part of this document is all about different bodybuilding supplements, and Brink seems pretty skeptical of a lot of the marketing hype.
Oh yeah, he's definitely not buying into all the promises.
Right, he encourages people to make decisions based on science, not flashy ads and unrealistic claims. He even jokes that aside from an anadrol enema, no supplement is going to magically transform your body.
Yeah, he's all about being an informed consumer and potentially saving some money by understanding what the research actually says.
Smart. So let's start with the andro supplements and androstenedione and those related compounds like 1-AD and 1-TEST. Those were pretty popular back in the day. What's the scientific consensus on them?
Brink explains that these are basically precursors to hormones like testosterone or nandrolone.
Hmm.
But the research on whether they actually help build muscle has been mixed. Some studies show only a tiny effect, while others suggest maybe a small increase.
Okay.
He also emphasizes the risk of side effects because they can convert into estrogen and DHT, which can lead to things like hair loss and gynecomastia.
Gynecomastia.
That's when men develop breast tissue.
Oh, right.
And he notes that the diones weren't very good at converting to the hormones people wanted.
But he seems a bit more positive about 1AD and 1-test, right?
Yeah, he's cautiously optimistic about those.
Okay.
He says they seem to be more potent, and importantly, they don't aromatize into estrogen as much.
That's good.
But he's clear that there's still not enough solid research on their effects on muscle mass or strength in healthy athletes who are already training hard. So while they might be more effective in theory, we don't have the definitive proof yet.
Okay, so more research needed. Let's move on to a super common supplement, arginine. It's often advertised as a way to increase growth hormone and boost nitric oxide. What's the deal with arginine?
Some early studies did show that arginine could cause a temporary bump in growth hormone, but that usually happened with very high doses, often given intravenously.
Okay.
And these short bursts of GH don't necessarily mean you'll get significant long-term muscle growth, especially if you're already healthy and working out. As for nitric oxide, it's definitely involved in a lot of processes in the body, including blood flow. But Brink doesn't present strong evidence that just taking arginine to increase NO is going to have a clear benefit for muscle growth or athletic performance for most people.
So the benefits are overblown. What about BCAA's branched chain amino acids like leucine, isoleucine, and valine? A lot of people use those to try and prevent muscle breakdown during intense training or when they're dieting.
Right. Brink explains that BCAAs, particularly leucine, are really important for muscle protein synthesis and for protecting muscle mass, especially when you're working out hard or in situations where you might be losing muscle. Some research suggests they could help endurance athletes too by reducing protein breakdown during long workouts.
Interesting. Another supplement that's made a comeback is colostrum. What's the scientific take on that one?
Colostrum is the first milk mammals produce, and it's full of growth factors and immune-boosting compounds.
Okay.
Initially, people were skeptical because they thought the processing methods might destroy these beneficial factors. But Brink says that processing techniques have gotten better, so there's renewed interest. He mentions a study that showed some promise for weight loss with a specific colostrum product. But those earlier concerns about how stable and available the growth factors are still something to keep in mind.
So the jury's still out on that one. Chromium is another one that comes up a lot, often in relation to blood sugar control and insulin sensitivity. Does it have any direct role in building muscle?
Brink emphasizes that chromium is a vital mineral.
Okay.
It's super important for regulating blood sugar and how insulin works, and he points out that deficiencies might be common because of modern food processing.
Right.
But while enough chromium is crucial for metabolic health and good blood sugar control, the document doesn't really link chromium supplements to direct increases in muscle mass unless someone is already deficient.
Got it. Another one that's marketed for both muscle building and fat loss is conjugated linoleic acid, or CLA. What does the research say about that one?
The research on CLA in humans is kind of all over the place. Some animal studies showed promising effects on body composition. And there was one study on novice bodybuilders that reported increases in strength and arm size.
Okay.
But other human studies, including some with experienced weightlifters and healthy women, haven't really shown big differences in body weight, body fat, or lean muscle mass with CLA. So it's a mixed bag.
So maybe not worth the money. Creatine, on the other hand, is probably the most well-researched and widely accepted supplement for performance and muscle growth. What are the key takeaways about creatine?
Brink is firmly on team creatine. He cites tons of evidence showing that it improves performance in high-intensity intermittent exercise, like weight training and sprinting.
Okay.
It does that by increasing your body's pool of phosphocreatine, which is crucial for making energy quickly during those types of activities.
Right.
He stresses that it's safe and effective for those purposes. He also touches on the idea of a loading phase.
Loading phase.
Basically taking a higher dose initially to saturate your muscles with creatine faster.
Yeah.
He says it can help, but it's not absolutely necessary to see benefits.
Interesting.
And he even mentions that creatine might have some medical uses beyond sports performance.
Cool. What about estrogen blockers, also called aromatase inhibitors or estrogen antagonists? Those are sometimes used in bodybuilding. What's the take on those?
Brink explains that they work in two main ways. They either block estrogen receptors in the body, or they inhibit the aromatase enzyme, which is what converts some male hormones into estrogen.
Okay.
But based on the info in this text, there's no real evidence that these supplements directly help with muscle growth in athletes.
So probably not worth the risk. Carnitine is another popular one, often sold as a fat burner, because it supposedly helps transport fatty acids to be used for energy. What are the implications for muscle building?
Brink explains that carnitine does help transport long-chain fatty acids into the mitochondria where they're burned for energy. It might have some health benefits and could be helpful for certain endurance athletes in specific situations. But the research on whether it's a powerful fat burner or performance enhancer for most people is inconsistent.
Mm.
And he points out that the doses used in studies that showed any positive effects were pretty high.
So maybe not the magic bullet some people claim it is.
Mm.
Let's not forget about basic vitamins and minerals. Calcium, for example, is important for bone health, but what about muscle function?
Brink makes it clear that calcium is vital, not just for strong bones, but also for your muscles to contract properly and for your nerves to transmit signals.
Interesting.
And because athletes sweat more and stuff, they might lose more calcium. Plus, a lot of people just don't get enough calcium in general.
Right.
So getting enough calcium is super important for overall muscle health and function.
What about glutamine? That's another really popular amino acid supplement, often linked to recovery and immune function. Can it help with muscle building?
Brink acknowledges that glutamine is crucial for a bunch of bodily functions like immune health, liver function, and gut health. He mentions studies that connect low glutamine levels to muscle loss in some situations and suggests it might help prevent overtraining.
Okay.
He even talks about a study that found a big spike in growth hormone after a small oral dose of glutamine. But he's also careful to say that short bursts of GH in healthy young athletes don't always translate to muscle growth.
Right.
Glutamine might also be involved in refilling your glycogen stores after exercise. Overall, he sees it as possibly helpful, especially for recovery and immune support in athletes.
Okay. Ginseng has a long history of use as an adaptogen. Does it have a place in a modern muscle building program?
While ginseng has been used traditionally to help the body deal with stress and has shown some antioxidant and potential blood sugar regulating effects, there's no strong evidence in the text that it directly helps build muscle or improve athletic performance.
What about HMB?
HMB, or beta-hydroxy, beta-methylbutyrate.
Right.
It's a metabolite of the amino acid leucine. The idea behind HMB is that it might be responsible for some of leucine's muscle-protecting effects, and that it might work at lower doses than leucine for that purpose. Some early research in animals looked good, but Brink points out that there's not enough solid research in healthy resistance-trained athletes to consistently show big benefits for muscle growth with HMB.
So more research is needed there too. What about KIC?
KIC, or alpha-ketosylcaprotide, is another one related to leucine and HMB.
Got it.
It's also been studied for its potential to reduce muscle breakdown, and early research showed some promise. But according to the text, there's very little human research specifically in athletes, and the doses used in the studies that did show an effect were really high. So Brink doesn't recommend KIC for athletes looking to build muscle. There's just not enough evidence.
Okay, moving on. 7-keto-DHEA is a hormone metabolite that's often claimed to help with weight loss. Does it have any implications for muscle building?
Brink does mention one human study that found 7-keto-DHEA led to decreases in body weight and body fat without affecting hormone levels. That's interesting for weight management, but the document doesn't link 7-keto-DHEA directly to muscle growth. We need more research to know if there are any indirect effects.
MCTs, or medium-chain triglycerides, are often touted as a quick energy source. Any benefits for muscle building?
While MCTs can be absorbed and used for energy quickly, the text doesn't really support the idea that they have any major advantages specifically for building muscle compared to other sources of calories.
What about methoxyisoflavones, or methoxy?
Brink is pretty clear on this one. There's no good data showing that methoxyisoflavones have any positive effects on muscle mass in healthy athletes who are already training.
Okay, so probably not worth it. Phosphatidylserine, or PS, has been studied for its potential to lower cortisol levels, which often go up after intense exercise. Could this indirectly benefit muscle growth?
Brink explains that phosphatidylserine does show some promise in possibly reducing cortisol levels, especially if you're overtrained or stressed out.
Yeah.
And since high cortisol can get in the way of muscle recovery and growth lowering, it could theoretically help. But he also mentions that PS is expensive, and we need more research specifically on athletes to figure out the best doses and whether it really impacts muscle mass and performance.
Okay, so it might be helpful, but more research is needed. What about ribose?
Ribose is a sugar that's involved in making high-energy compounds in the body. But based on the text, there's not much evidence that supplementing with it actually improves athletic performance or helps build muscle in healthy athletes. Some studies in people with specific medical conditions have shown potential, but not so much for the average athlete.
So probably not worth it for most people. What about saw palmetto? That's usually used for prostate health. Why is it even mentioned in the context of muscle building?
Saw palmetto is sometimes added to andro-type supplements with the claim that it can block testosterone from converting into DHT. The idea is to reduce some of the androgenic side effects. But the text doesn't give any evidence that it actually works that way in athletes or that it directly helps with muscle growth.
Okay. Another amino acid that gets some attention is tyrosine. Any direct or indirect benefits from muscle building?
It hasn't been shown to be an effective weight loss supplement on its own, but it might make some weight loss products that contain stimulants work better by suppressing appetite.
Interesting.
The text doesn't say anything about it directly helping build muscle, but it does mention that it has stimulant-like properties, so people with certain medical conditions should be careful.
Okay, good to know. What about taurine?
Taurine is another amino acid with a lot of roles in the body, like regulating cell volume, controlling blood pressure, and improving insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
There's some evidence that it might have health benefits, and we know that taurine levels go down as we age. But based on the info in the document, the direct benefits for muscle building or athletic performance aren't so clear.
So maybe more of a general health thing. What about tribulus terrestris?
That one's often marketed as a natural testosterone booster. But despite its traditional use for things like impotence and the claims that it increases testosterone, Brink says there's no modern research in healthy athletes who lift weights to back those claims up. One study he mentions actually showed no changes in body composition or strength with tribulus.
Interesting. We can't forget about basic antioxidants like vitamin C and vitamin E. Do they directly help build muscle, or are their benefits more indirect?
Brink explains that vitamin C and E are important antioxidants that are good for your overall health.
Right.
And they might indirectly benefit athletes in the long run by supporting the immune system, which can take a hit from intense exercise.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But studies haven't generally found that taking extra vitamin C or E directly boosts muscle growth or performance in healthy people.
Okay, so important for overall health, but not necessarily a direct muscle builder. Finally, let's talk about whey protein. It's a staple for a lot of people in the fitness world. What are the main benefits and types of whey protein?
Brink presents whey protein as a great source of high-quality protein that might have some health benefits. One thing he mentions is that it can help increase glutathione levels.
Glutathione.
It's a powerful antioxidant that's really important for your immune system.
Got it.
He talks about different types of whey protein, like concentrate ion exchange, isolates, which unfortunately can lose some of the good stuff during processing.
Okay.
And then there are third-generation isolates that try to keep more of those beneficial components. He highlights that whey protein has a high biological value, and it's packed with BCAAs.
Right.
There's even some early research in rats suggesting it might be good for both muscle gain and fat loss when taken before exercise.
Interesting.
But Brink wisely points out that it's not a magic solution on its own.
Okay, so whey protein is good, but it's not a miracle worker. Last but not least, what about ZMA?
ZMA, that's zinc, magnesium, and aspartate.
Right.
It's often marketed as the testosterone booster. Brink explains the logic behind combining these minerals to potentially support testosterone production. And he mentions a study by Dr. Brilla that showed positive effects on testosterone and strength in football players taking ZMA.
Interesting.
But he really emphasizes that ZMA is only going to work if you're actually deficient in zinc and or magnesium.
To get your levels checked.
Exactly.
Okay, wow. We've really gone deep into muscle building nutrition and all sorts of supplements, all based on the information in Will Brink's Muscle Building Nutrition. So to sum it all up, what are the biggest takeaways for our listeners?
The absolute foundation is energy balance if you want to gain weight. And hopefully muscle, you have to consistently eat more calories than you burn. And the text suggests around 45 ncals per kilogram of body weight as a starting point for active people.
45 ncals per kilo. Got it.
Then you have to pay attention to your macros. Aim for enough protein, probably somewhere between 1 and 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, and focus on lean whole food sources.
Lean protein.
Don't be afraid of healthy fats. Make sure you're getting a good mix of polyunsaturated, especially omega-3s, monounsaturated and saturated fats, remembering that some saturated fat is needed for hormone production.
Okay.
And finally, be smart about your carbs and the glycemic index, using higher GI options after workouts, but sticking to less processed, lower GI foods most of the time.
So it's all about balance and timing. And as for supplements, it seems like a lot of them overpromise and underdeliver.
Yeah, there are a few standouts though.
Right. Like what?
Creatine has solid evidence for boosting performance in activities that help build muscle. Whey protein is a great source of high-quality protein and has other potential health benefits. And ZMA might be helpful if you're low in zinc or magnesium, but for most other supplements, the research is still inconclusive or doesn't really support the claims.
So buyer beware.
Exactly. And Brink makes it clear that no matter how good your diet is, you won't get results without a consistent and well-structured workout program, especially strength training.
Yeah, we focus on nutrition and supplements today, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. Right.
And it's super important to remember that all this information comes from one specific source, and things are always changing in the world of nutrition and supplementation. Do your own research and see what works for you. So here's something to think about. Given everything we've talked about today, what's one small change you can make to your diet or supplement routine based on this information that you can actually track and measure to see if it's helping you build muscle?
That's a great question to consider.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the fascinating and complex world of muscle-building nutrition. If you have any more questions or other areas you'd like us to explore in future deep dives, let us know. Until next time.